one thing that's interesting is if you look at the rhetoric of the right and of a lot of Trump adjacent people right now, that like some of what Varda is saying is weirdly not far from their own conception of what they're doing, right? So I'm thinking here about even the sort of weird edgelord pseudo intellectual types. Just wrote something about Curtis Yarvin, who just got a big splashy interview in the New York Times, because the current vice president of the United States has called him a friend and cited his writings sometimes, as have various other people who are big in Trump world. And if you read what somebody like him says, there's really no pretense to being anti-elite in a fundamental way. I mean, there kind of is, because there's this I think they get a lot of rhetorical juice out of sounding or feeling anti-elite. But if you actually look at what they say, they're very clear that these, they have this, and or JD Vance himself, right, has said a bunch of things like this. They're very clear that they have this worldview where you're just going to be ruled over by some sort of elite regardless. That's totally inescapable. And so the only question is whether you're being ruled by a good, virtuous, I don't know, based elite, or by a bad, New York Times reading woke elite. And they really couldn't be more explicit about that, right? Like the Yarvin stuff about the cathedral can kind of sound like this funhouse mirror version of Noam Chomsky, and Edward Herman talking about the corporate media manufacturing consent for the status quo. But the difference is that, somebody like Chomsky ultimately, wants a greater variety of perspectives to be allowed in, and, has these sort of very deep pro-democracy views that people should just be able to judge for themselves what's right. And, has really defended the free speech of some of his most intense ideological enemies. Whereas, the sort of Yarvin types are very explicit that they're like, no, we just want to manufacture consent for our shit, right? We don't think that the peasants are capable of figuring this stuff out for themselves at all, right? They obviously need to be ruled by somebody, right? So it's very, in some ways, the project is very, very explicitly, we want to purge the elites, to get them to ideologically align with us, and which overlaps with some of what Kuba and I wrote about before the election, about Trump wanting to purge the deep state so he could weaponize it, and it also, if you look at some of what Trump has said, and I do take great comfort from how incompetent a lot of this has been. That also gets some of what Varn was saying. And I think some of this comes out of this flood the zone strategy that Trump has had in the last week or so. That's they're just trying to do so many things at once that nobody can keep track and nobody knows what to respond to. But also that means that they're doing a bunch of stuff, kind of without filling out the forms that you're supposed to, so it can just get thrown out right away. Yeah. You have all these laws. They're like, oh, you have to wait 60 days before you do this or that. And they're just ignoring that stuff, which makes it trivially easy to throw out. But, I don't know. I mean, the thing that really hit me about this, I was reading a description of the funding, pause. And even some of the language used to describe it, was this stuff oh, we're gonna make sure, that all the funding gets frozen until we can make sure that none of it's going to anything woke, right? That's the way they actually put it. And it's man, it's I guess Ron DeSantis won that primary after all, because I remember during the Republican primary, Trump making fun of him for constantly calling things woke and saying I don't even know what that means. And
isn't that this whole thing? We're gonna put this freeze on all this federal loan money because we have to make sure you're not doing DEI initiatives.
Yeah, right. And I think I see Paul Prescott in the chat talking about, collective bargaining agreements. And it's like, I think that really, probably gets to outside of like the true believing weirdos, of whom there are plenty in and
Mhm.
around the Trump administration. I think that at least gets to what's like really at stake for a lot of these people, right? It's like, well, it's just like completely ruin, the bargaining power of these federal workers, and also, like, again, as part of the flood the zone fuckery. Um, one of the things that Trump just did that I think a lot of people are just sort of registering is another example of, oh, he's like going after some agency that libs like, and they're, making little procedural, whining noises about it. Is he just illegally fired one of the members of the National Labor Relations Board?
Yes.
Law is like very clear that you're not allowed to do this. That you can only remove them with cause, and you have to wait, and blah blah blah, right? Which, again, I think kind of gets lost in the shuffle. But I mean, that's really
But
part of the, I mean, they're, but it takes it down to like the NLRB doesn't have a quorum anymore, and and stuff that might have gone through them can go straight to the courts now, which takes place in the context where of a bunch of oligarchs, including Trump BFF at the moment until they have a falling out in 6 months, Elon Musk, are trying to challenge the constitutionality of the NLRB. I mean, like, so it is part of this, like, actually really ambitious effort to, undo the New Deal.
what do you say to people that have, let's call them leftists,
Yeah.
that are not fans of the NLRB? It's got a history. We all admit it's got a history. And they think maybe the dismantling of it under this administration may be a good thing. What say you to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the track record of this theory sucks. That if things just get enough better, then everybody's going to draw. The working class will all draw the conclusions from it that we want them to draw, and it's actually going to work out well for us. It's like we're doing some complicated pool shot, and it never seems to work out that way, I've got to say, in practice, or certainly not predictably enough that it makes any sense to think of this as a strategy, right? And so I would gently suggest, or maybe not so gently, because I think some of the people you're talking about really suck, um, that if you're cheering on the destruction of the last bit of organization or structural power that the American working class has, on the assumption that you're playing 12-dimensional chess, and it's ultimately, is
Mhm.
ultimately going to lead to some sort of socialist revival. It doesn't strike me that you're being helpful.